Hi, and welcome to another episode of Walleye Chronicles, where I get you guys off the street. We come in here, we just talk fishing. There's no rhyme or reason to what we're going to talk about or why we're going to talk about it, but we're going to talk about it. So this week, I have your NWT pro, Mr. David Landsteiner, also known on the socials as Delta Walleye. How you doing today, David?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's do a little quick recap on your year last year. I know it wasn't the way you wanted it to go, but let's talk through some of these tournaments and see how it went for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what our first tournament was on. Erie?
Yeah, you were Port Clinton, I think, Erie.
Yes. I got out there a couple of days early, and I started live scoping right away, and I ended up catching fish and was pretty excited about what could possibly be. The wind and the weather made it really challenging for that event. I think we ended up finding some bigger fish farther east. My teammates actually found them, so we ended up making that long run in that heavier, those 6 footers. I guess day 2 was 6 footers. It's been a while, but both days we ended up going down there and fishing the same program, which is kind of crazy because we ended up doing a trolling bite by the mouth of one of the rivers down there. They were post spawn, and they were the first fish that were feeding, so they seemed to be a little bit heavier than the rest of the fish in the system. A lot of the top 10s came from right there. We lost a couple key fish that I can't explain why they came off right at the boat, and saw everybody else catch them around us, and it just wasn't our day on both days. So we struggled on that one.
Hey listeners, let's talk outdoor streaming. What is the best outdoor streaming platform out there? Well, it's simple. It's Fix TV. Not only do they have this great program, but they have all kinds of hunting and fishing shows along with some weaponry shows. So when you get bored and need something to do, get your fix with Fix TV. And when you're done with that and you have that fix to get out in the outdoors, jump on therealshot.com and get everything you need to satisfy your fix.
I knew it was a big risk taking that long run.
So what's that like when you're getting ready to go that ride and you got those big Lake Erie waves ahead of you? Do you have to prepare mentally? You lock the boat down better than normal, or how do you kind of go about those days? I mean, that's one thing that everybody hears about Lake Erie, and how do you guys, no one really talks about how you guys get across the lake. I'm sure you're not putting the pedal down the metal. You got to be going, driving a little secure. So how does that go about in your head, and how do you make that trip safe?
It's that balance of trying to get to your spot and maximize fishing time, plus not breaking your stuff. I'll tell you right now that every guy has a little bit different line of where they push those limits. I've seen people, I won't name any names, but people have dropped kicker motors in the bottom of Lake Erie and other by pushing it really hard. And I've tried to just save my boat and also not, try to make that right decision about how fast to go. I can kind of feel it. I haven't broken too much stuff yet, so I must be doing okay. I think a lot of guys had hull damage to their boats as well, and I haven't had any on mine. Part of that might be just the size of the motor you have on the back. I have a 300, and some of those guys with the bigger motor, you're putting a little bit more stress on.
Yeah, that little more hinge point with that more weight.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what I do. I always batten down the hatches, the head of the trolling motors, and everything like that can go wrong. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong in those situations, is what I found. And sometimes that, like on day 2, the weather came up on us where it was a really nice ride on the way there, and it was only on the way back that it really made a difference. So you have to obviously, figure out the wind direction, because the direction of which your boat's going into is going to make a big deal of how fast you can travel. Sometimes running shorelines is better because you can stay out of that wind and just go faster, but then you got the fuel dilemma as well.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, we ended up getting fuel down there at the marina. A lot of that stuff we call ahead of time and set that up ahead of time if we plan on making a long run.
That's cool. So you can just so is there any rules with that? You can't get off the boat, I'm guessing, and just gotta set up ahead of time with them.
It has to be a publicly available service, so you just can't have like the can sitting there.
Have a guy show up with a can.
Yeah. So a lot of that is just getting a hold of the right people, because some of these people, if you come into a season, I can think of Chamberlain, for example, they don't have their fuel stuff in a lot of times on those early tournaments.
Oh.
And they'll tell us, hey, we're working on getting it in, but we don't know if we're going to get it in or not. So you're calling literally the day before, like, did you get it in? Am I going south? Am I going north? You're making all these last minute decisions based on a lot of other things happening.
Okay, we don't see much about that. How much is there refueling in NWT?
Most places,
or adding fuel, I should say.
Yeah, there's going to be, but most places have at least one option. You are definitely limited, though. You might only have one, whereas if you go farther away, depending on your fuel capacity of your boat, it's going to dictate how far you can go.
But does it have, do guys travel that far that it's a regular thing? On most tournaments, I would seem like Mississippi probably didn't, obviously Winnebago you wouldn't, but like Lake Erie and those bigger lakes, or is that something that happens frequently?
Yeah, absolutely. It can make the entire difference if, the fish are back in a cove spawning down south somewhere. You might be the only one that fishes that area, and you might not need 7 or 8 hours of tournament fishing. You might only need 2 hours to get your fish. So in those cases, if you're willing to go explore those areas and find them, you might spend 3 or 4 hours traveling just for, like I said, a couple hours, get your fish and get back. It's all big numbers game. It always has been,
Yep. So got out of Port Clinton, and then I believe next you went to Red Wing.
Yep, we went to Red Wing. I had done pretty good in pre-fish there. I'd caught my PB in front of what river is that on? I think it's the Rush River. When it comes into Pool 4, there was quite a few big fish hanging down there. The water kept dropping, so a lot of those fish were hanging in the grass and in shallows. There were still fish around, but I didn't feel like that was going to be a good move for tournament day. Some people went after their overs first. Some people went after their unders. I kind of determined to get quality unders might be a little harder. So my plan was to troll an area where I'm pretty comfortable with year-round in a flats area. I did get my fish after a couple hours on day one, and we went on to one of the main points and live scoped, so the bigger fish. My co actually caught our over on day one. It was a pretty, 24, 25.
Nice.
So we were sitting somewhat decent, I always try to survive day one and then hope that you can make a really big move on day two. But, if you completely drop out or don't bring in your fish on day one, it's kind of hard to even be positive about the second day,
Right. And that was it seemed to be kind of I don't know if the bite was tough, but I guess the regulations and how the fish you could take on your unders and overs, and how does that play for that tournament? It seemed like that made a big difference.
Yeah, that one was all you wanted to obviously get as close to 20 inches being your unders, and then you wanted to maximize your biggest over. So for us, it wasn't a totally hard decision to keep that 25 incher. I would have liked to prefer a 28 or 29 because I knew they were there, but it's kind of like gambling, if it was day two and I knew that I needed it to place, then it would have been an easier decision. And you never know what everybody else is going to do, what the weights are going to be. So that's the other variable. I would still probably do the same thing, because like I said, we were sitting decent. I don't even remember. I think we were the upper third of the field on day one. And then on day two, we just had some unfortunate luck. We did the same program verbatim, trolled for the unders. We got like a 19 7/8 under, which is just a chunk of fish, perfect. Started out, it's going to be one of those days where everything goes right. Well, whatever happened, we were trolling crankbaits. I think we were using the Storm Smash Shad. That's one of my favorites there, in like a Wonder Bread color. He was thrashing around. He caught one of the treble hooks to his gills. And there's the dead fish penalty there. So this was like 9 in the morning where we got him, and I'm having my co just babysit him all day long. And by about 1:32 p.m., there was no way we were going to save him. So it's one of those things. If we would have caught him in the afternoon, we probably could have kept him alive just long enough.
Right.
But that was a dead fish penalty, so that took away that nice fish, that half pound or whatever it was deduction. I think our over was pretty small as well that day. So, just the way they go. I think I finished that one mid-pack. And that's kind of like how the season was generally was for me. A lot of the stuff.
So is it tough when you're out? When you're out there and it's not going your way and you're just trying to get that fish to kind of is it like a point thing? Just kind of get the points, and kind of move on?
I kind of I was trying to have the mentality, even from the first event, that I was more interested in securing a top 10 this year than I was making the championship.
Okay.
So, while it would be nice to make the championships, and that was my primary goal in my first full year as a pro, but I still probably this next year will be more aggressive, trying to go for winning a regular season event or even a top 5 would be better to me than making the championship.
I got you.
That's just my mentality right now, is just to go for it all the time. And for me too, and I don't even know what I'm gonna do next year, but I'm definitely want to concentrate more on scoping than anything else.
I'm gonna ask you that. So you were doing, so the first 2 tournaments you scoped and you did trolling. Are you like getting tugging both ways, or what way you want to move, or as the year progresses, are you kind of pushing more towards scoping and kind of laying off the trolling?
I trolled on the Erie event, even though I had some success scoping. And that was the event, I think, that the fishing community realized that even out there, that scoping is going to be very viable.
Yep.
Up until that point last year, I don't think anybody, I don't know if you can do it in the wet wind and those waves. Well, you've got some of the best guys out there that are doing it. And boat control is just huge.
Right.
I was throwing out drift socks and try to keep my speed down and everything, and it was just too much at that time. I actually just purchased a power pole 2 days ago, so we're gonna do a different direction here and go all in on the scoping.
So are you putting the power pole on with the kicker, or are you taking the kicker off?
Yep, I'm gonna put the one power pole this year, and then we'll see how that goes. Maybe I can always take it off and add another power pole if I really need that boat control. I've just gotten, without it, I've gotten used to either drift socks or just turning that trolling motor head around to slow me down real quick.
Yep.
So there's going to be a lot of tools to use, depending on what situation we're in. Are you going with the wind? Are you going against it? It's just until you get out there and put yourself in those things, it's hard to say which is the best one,
Right. That's true. So you said that you had one that that had problems keeping alive. So was there any special techniques that you guys use besides the blue juice? Just kind of cool the water down or put fin weights on them?
That was the thing that I do mostly, is the fin weight seems to keep the belly down, and they usually get a lot of life out of them.
Mm-hmm.
I also, traveling from that spot to the mid-lake points, I did take it quite a bit easier. It probably cost me an extra 2 minutes, 3 minutes of fishing, but I know that fish isn't sloshing around as much,
Right.
So that's the one thing you got to consider. It was nice to get it, but at the time of day at which we got it, and the situation was, kind of a little bit of a curse on top of it. I still don't know how it got that deep. Like I said, we were in heavy current, and I think we were trolling downstream at like 6 miles an hour.
Wow.
And we were still getting fit. It's amazing how fast you can go when you're moving with the current and still get bit. But, when we were, I believe that one was going upstream, which we weren't going very fast, but all that pressure and then thrashing around back there is just right angle,
So then you wrap up there and we head to Green Bay.
Yep. Green Bay. I was on a pretty good bite there on hair jigs, just purple hair jigs.
Love
and I never really had a lot of confidence in that, but my teammates, you remember there was the alowives, and everybody was struggling to even catch any fish. I caught 11 walleyes in pre-fish.
Wow.
Moving, and I would find a spot and catch 1 or 2 and then move. And so I had lots of spots down south that were holding fish in kind of the shallow, rockier areas. And it was probably a lot of a reaction bite, that purple hair jig darting through the rocks is simulating the gobies. And I ended up catching one that was near Marquette. The day before, it was really windy. I said, I'm just going to check out this area right by Marquette there, and place that has historically held fish. And I was in there for 20 minutes, and I caught like a 5 and an 11-pounder on hair jig. And I didn't go there for the tournament because the wind was going to switch again, and I didn't believe that those fish would hold there.
Yep.
Is
it a tough choice? Do you sit in bed? And wonder about that? Or the next day, were you wondering about check on that spot knowing you caught those big fish there? Or is it just something you just knew wasn't going to be there?
I didn't know for a fact it wouldn't be there, but I just felt that it wasn't going to be there. My teammates ended up going there. And, I told them about it, and we work as a team. They didn't do well there. Okay. So it ended up being the right choice, I think. I ended up drawing a gentleman that's I think he's in his 80s, and he does the co-angler thing. I'm not sure if he's still going to be doing it, but I had to consider that when I made my long run as well. And I did the math on the fuel. I ended up going up to a beta knock,
Okay.
which is way up.
Yep, that's a fun drive.
Yeah, and in the wind had crept up that morning a little more than it forecasted. So the choices were either get fuel on the Cedar River, which is the shoreline, then go there. But I felt that if I could cut back on the speed, get a little better fuel economy, I could make it directly there and just bypass, because once again, you don't know how many people are stopping for fuel in front of you.
That's true.
With a 300 on my boat, I'm a little slow on the slower side, probably like max out at 53, 54 miles an hour.
Yep.
With these guys that are going 60 to 70, they're going to get me.
That is true. Yeah, that is true. And they're also going to burn more gas too. I've noticed that in my boat. Once I creep up over that certain RPMs, I lose my gas faster than if you just kind of take it nice and slow and save on that way.
Yep. Yeah. So we ended up making it. I mean, the fuel alarms were all going off when we finally got fuel that day. But it definitely limited me when I got to my spot. I had pre-fished other areas that were maybe even 4 or 5 miles in, and I couldn't go check them out on day one because I knew that I had to use all that fuel to get back to Cedar River.
Okay.
On day one, I had done a combo program where I was live scoping, and then I was hanging crawler harnesses up in the back. I figured that was a good idea to have my sit there and watch boards, while I move. Mm-hmm. We caught fish. I think we caught sheephead, we caught bass, we caught pike, we caught everything but walleyes up there. In that same area, we were doing pretty well. I know some guys did okay up there in the tournament. Actually, the guy that got second was there. I don't remember. Oh, Eric McCoy won it, so he was not fishing up there. Second place was right where I was in that general area. I had noticed that water up there so gin clear.
Yep.
That it became a challenge to stalk these fish, lay a cast on them and not spook them. A lot of those guys were using that death jig. I did a little bit in pre-fish, but my best luck was just simply a slip bobber and a leech. I had tried to devise a technique it seems like you want a little small jig on your slip bobber rig. If you put a plain hook on, your chances of getting tangled up are greatly increased. So I've started playing around with thickness of line and where I put the bobber stops and all that stuff. So that's kind of been an off-season thing with me, where I've just been rigging up different rigs and weights just to see how far I can cast and still be still get that bait down, because you cast in 60, 70 feet out in front of the boat, then you got to hope your bait goes down, and if it doesn't, you're just wasting time reeling it in, doing it over again. So it's frustrating too when you have the fish see your bait, they go up and they look at it and they just go back down, and reject it. And I had that happen quite a few times during the tournament.
Right. And honestly, that's kind of funny you say that, because as I started to get more and more into live scope this year, I turned to that kind of a method to help me out when I couldn't cast farther away. And it seemed like if I was using the power cork method, just really whipping it out there with the split shot, and then I could pick up my jig faster and see it faster farther out, and it was a little easier for me at the time because I'm not much of a swim jig fisherman. It's not, I'm kind of old school. If it's not the bottom, I don't really know what I'm doing. So I was like a good way in between for me was to start using a bobber and start throwing out. And I started throwing out pretty much everywhere, just to kind of helped me. Maybe it just was in my own head of helped me figure out, line my bait, my line, my stuff with the live scope versus just throwing a jig out there and trying to figure out where the hell it went to. Because I just not always could tell my distance. I was a bad distancer. I can't, I would throw what I thought was 30 feet. Well, it was like 60 feet or, vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And especially if you see your stuff in the water column, you just look out there and you don't have to use a depth checker or anything like that. You can just see it and be like, okay, I need to go 3 feet lower or higher. I started marking my line, like my system I have now, and I might switch to more mono, but I have a braid plus leader setup, and I'll end up using a permanent marker just to mark certain depths, and I use that as a baseline for 20. Then I can just go from that, when I move the bobber around or the knot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, how was day two for Green Bay?
We ended up doing the same program. I think that day I decided to go up the Cedar River. People said the line wasn't as bad for fuel in the morning. So I went the shoreline and filled up there on the way up. I think there was like 5 boats in front of me. So we're looking at probably 15 minutes, waiting for.
That's not bad.
No, it wasn't too bad. And then I ended up going up there and looking around. My we had seen other people catch a few fish around us. I mean, there was quite a few people doing the same program up there.
Yep.
180 was up there. John Kopchak, which he got second, he was the same area. And they went in early. They had caught their 3rd fish because we'd only get 3.
Yep.
We only had probably 2.5 hours to fish up there. So, I mean, it really can go either way. I mean, when you have a couple fish come look at your bait and go back down, I mean,
yep.
catching 2 of your 3 would have been a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But we ended up getting 1 fish. I think it was like an 8 or 9 pounder because they were all pretty good size, with literally no time left. I mean, I think we had already at the point where like, well, we're done, but we don't have any fish, so it doesn't really matter if we're late, kind of deal.
Right. Yep.
And I think 2 or 3 minutes after that expiration is when we caught the fish. So there was no water in the live well or anything. And I ended up grabbing my bucket in the Ranger. There's a garbage bucket, and I ended up scooping water out as fast as I can into the live well because we needed to get water for that fish right away. Got up on plane, and I had a problem with my trim wire on my motor had worked its way loose. And so I couldn't get up on plane. I get up on plane, but I couldn't trim out for maximum efficiency.
Yep.
With the trim at my throttle. So I had my code back there, sitting on the floor, reaching up, touching the button.
Yep.
But then he'd also touch the wire while I touched the button to get the right angle.
Wow.
But once the motor was trimmed up, then we were good to go for 30 miles.
Right. Yeah, it's true. Once you go, you pretty much, on that bump, you just sit back and relax and then hopefully enjoy the ride. The funny part about that going way up when you're in Green Bay is we all hear about the people that go up and do so well up there and make the drive. Like you said, you only get very minimum time to fish depending on the ride up, basically. But there's a lot of times you go up there and it just doesn't happen too. And I think people forget, we don't hear about all those stories of guys that go up and just didn't get on the right bite or just didn't, their fish were negative for whatever reason or just getting the right bait in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely was a risk taking, especially like I said, knowing that I had fish going south on the hair jigs that I could just run across the rocks and catch fish. And that's essentially what Eric McCoy had done. Yep. I think they were chambers, there's rock piles out there with the wind was blowing into. It works obviously there too. So I had 2 different choices, and I figured that was to me was the bigger risk, but the higher reward could have been there as well.
Right.
I don't know. I might do the other way around next time. We'll see.
Right. There's always the other way. And then you're on to Lake Sakakawea.
Yep. Sakakawea. That was I ended up. I don't think I even trolled one time there. In pre-fish, we had caught some fish, some smaller, decent fish. I went some major exploring up the Little Missouri River, way up into coves, and looked for a lot of shallower water. It seems like a lot of that warmer, shallower water, you can hold bigger fish. We found fish scattered, some of them in trees and that sort of thing. And I just didn't really put together a pattern that I was comfortable with fishing one spot. So I kind of had an idea of where I wanted to go, and I would just keep on hitting spots until hopefully find the right pod.
Right.
And it was that's kind of what it was just picking off one here and there. In pre-fish the day before, I got a 28.5-inch walleye. It weighed 5.2 pounds. It was like a stick. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was. We ended up getting a couple decent ones in the tournament. I think I brought in my limit of 5 fish a day. But nothing spectacular. We weren't on those big fish, and I know some of the guys. I've heard some guys did well in trees, with scoping and that sort of thing. So it's kind of the same thing, the same tune over and over again. It seems like that live scope thing is really going to be essential all the time.
So you finished up, didn't make the cut for the championship. What's some pros and cons that you took from your year this year?
Pros and cons. Let's see. The pros would be that, the learning curve. Every time I go out there, whether you do well or not, you're always picking up something new. It seems like to me. What I realize is that no matter how good you get, you're competing against everybody else that's also climbing that ladder. So where you may have done well a couple years ago, as the time goes on, everybody else is going to be getting better with you too. So it's going to take that much more to compete and be good. I think you're going to see a lot more people enter the top 10s than what you typically have. I mean, those guys will still be good, but I think that there's somewhat of a ceiling involved until technology changes. I ended up making commitments. I just upgraded from a 12-inch to a 16-inch screen just so I can make out fish separation a little better.
Yep.
Next season, and then obviously the power pole we talked about. Hopefully that'll help me with my boat control. And the other thing too is my son and I went up to Lake of the Woods just to fun fish during their AIM championship.
Yep.
And I said to Chase, I said, let's just keep track of our fish and see how we would match up, versus the rest of the field, because we were up there and we were staying with guys that fish that circuit, friends of mine, and helping them pre-fish a little bit. Actually, one of the spots we found, they ended up placing in. So that worked out pretty good for them. And I got really confident scoping on Lake of the Woods. That's when, that jig and a crawler combination is just deadly, with a tungsten jig and crawler. Seeing the fish behavior, which way your bait approaches the fish. My son and I did really well up there. I think we ended up being like 6th or 7th place in that tournament if we would have been in it out of, I don't know, whether there was 40, 50 boats or something like that.
40, I think.
So yeah, I mean, we got a lot of decent fish, and I purposely put myself out in situations where it was windy instead of trying to find refuge where it's more fishable. I'd say, let's go out here where we're taking water over the bow, and let's see if we can do this. And that's what I think that's what you need to do to continually be better.
So you had, I mean, and knowing with you and talking with you a little bit on the side and before and after tournaments and stuff, it seemed to me like you had an epiphany at some point this year that it's basically live scope or bust.
That seems like it, especially when you see the guys on top all the time and you just come to that conclusion. But I will say, I fished the MWC with Tom, and we were leading that Bitter Lake event. And what we did is a combination program there of trolling for the big ones and going through trolling for the big ones. And actually, no, we didn't combo there. We live scoped and pre-fish, but we ended up fishing. We ended up trolling in a shallower area where we could cycle through fish faster. Mm-hmm. I think even more efficiently than live scope. I mean, it was every 1 or 2 minutes you were reeling in a fish. Sometimes you had doubles or triples on. We were throwing back 15, 16, 15, 14s until you get that 118.
Right.
And I just don't know if you can size out fish and move the boat fast enough with 4 lines covering out an area going 2-3 miles an hour.
So was there a moment that you just thought to yourself, sitting in your boat or driving back, that you thought, hey, I gotta make this live scope thing part of more towards the front of what I want to do?
Yeah, I don't think there was a particular moment. I just think it was just a little bit of information every time. Be like, yep, that's definitely working for them, and it's time to go all in on it. Is what kind of kept saying. And I had started out with a Lowrance Active Target 1, fishing against guys that had the LVS 34s.
Oh, yep.
When I made that move, just going over the Garmin, it was a big difference for me. Now I know that Lowrance has improved their technology too, and I think it's just going to be a constantly improving technology of a company. But for me, just seeing the way my eyes work and the color separations and everything with Garmin is where I found start having more success. I knew what I was looking at. Putting it on the trolling motor, I know Tom Wynn says this a lot, but if you have a pole, that's just one more thing to do with your hand while you can have hands free and you're moving around covering ground. I think that's the ticket. And Chase and I fished a smaller tournament in Alexandria this fall. We did all right, but we ended up. I had him on the big motor. We were driving 5 or 6 miles an hour with the big motor in shallow bays, and picking off fish that I could see 100 feet away that were suspended in cabbage.
Wow.
So now we just, like I said, being the numbers game it is. Instead of going 2-3 miles an hour with the trolling motor, you put the big motor down and just spot them away.
Yeah, it's weird. I almost wonder if it's going to chase some people away, per se. Some of the traditional trolling guys going to be kind of like, I can't compete no more. It doesn't seem that the I mean, other than I guess Tom did whoop up on an AIM World for a while, but it doesn't seem like it's really got itself into AIM and some of the other tournaments yet. It seemed like the duos tournaments, the partner tournaments, that those are still pretty much dominated by trollers yet.
Yeah, and that's one reason I think I'm gonna with Chase. I think Chase will be my partner. I think we're gonna start fishing MWCs this next year.
Yep.
I'm not 100% committed on the entire NWT season. I have the lodging booked, so it's obviously I'm very serious about doing it. But I don't know what direction we're going to go. But I think some of the even AIM stuff, I think Chase and I are going to start doing some of that stuff with live scope.
Right.
Just for that reason you said, because I thought the same exact thing, that you're not seeing the same. You're seeing a lot of the outcomes with trollers on those other circuits.
Yeah, and I don't knock anybody that, I mean, I am like you and like everybody else diligently trying to catch up. But part of me thinks, and this is maybe a little crazy here, part of me thinks that by the time I catch up, that the fish are gonna have already kind of figured out what we're doing, and something else is going to happen. You know, that now that on some of these lakes where we live scope a ton, like Winnebago and stuff like that, and Green Bay, that they're getting farther and farther and farther away, and these beams are kind of doing whatever they're doing to them, that make it even harder for the average guy or average person to get that. And if you don't have that baseline of how to do it, as they extend farther out, it's going to be hard for all of us to catch up. Not that I'm crying or whining. It just seems like that's kind of the direction it's going.
Yeah, there might be some merit in what you're saying, you know, just the pressure of them, you know, maybe they associate that noise or whatever it is that they hear with a bait in front of them. They'd be like, well, last time that I heard this pain noise,
right,
it wasn't a fun time for me. So I don't know if it's going to be something that happens or not. I could definitely see it happening.
Right, because I've noticed when I go to the small little lakes for fun, and it's a whole different experience than if I go to a lake that gets hit a lot by a lot of guys with live scopes, or just that gets fished a ton. Green Bay is different, and Winnebago is different than some of the other little lakes that you kind of go around and have some fun on.
Yeah, it's hard to, you know, for the fisheries to manage these resources when they don't know what the overall effect is. You know, I mean, I know for a fact that, like, I would hope some of the tournament circuits change their format of, you know, of bringing the fish in and stressing the fish out, because I'm sure the mortality rate's way worse than it is with just catch your photo and release, you know.
Yeah, there's some pretty good studies coming out of the bass world that those do, even if they're released well, that does not mean they're going to make it.
Right.
So do you think? I mean, I assume that, I can't imagine we go another 2 or 3 years that live bringing them in is going to be around anymore.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I've heard rumors of things changing, but until it actually happens, you know, I don't know how they end up bringing the excitement of a live weigh-in. You know, that's the big thing. They try to draw a crowd and build it up.
Right.
There's a way to do it digitally or something that, you know, maybe at least reduce it. Maybe you bring in your biggest fish, or maybe, I don't know what the actual is.
Yeah, because you just see so many going on to something different, and all these other ones are so, I mean, I do the AIM and do a couple local ones that are all catch, pitch, and release, and they're so much easier to deal with. You don't have the stress of, like you said, babysitting a fish all day long. That's very stressful in itself, and much less you're trying to catch trying to keep fish alive and keep catching fish.
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of been one of the things too, like, I understand that the emphasis is on fish care. So you want to be a responsible sportsman and keep them alive. And, you know, there can be, if you don't put your live well pump on and the fish die, well, that's your fault. You probably should pay the penalty for having dead fish. Right. But like my situation where I had one catch it in the gill, like, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just, he hit my crankbait, we reeled it in, and it was bleeding, you know? So
I kind of feel like just reading some of those reports, I mean, you know, about how the fish get beat up and just inside the tanks, inside banging around. And even if you do everything you can do, it's still going to be very likely that down the road those fish aren't going to make it.
Right.
But the other thing too that I think is driving it even more than anything else is the amount the regulations that are changing so much now that everybody's dropping down. It's, you know, Green Bay only having 3 fish was kind of, to me, kind of odd. You know, the weights were different, everything was kind of off. I think things like that are going to make it, you know, because if you do if you do catch, pitch, and release, it doesn't matter what you catch. You can still have 5 across the board throughout the year.
Yeah, that would be a little bit better, and it would change everybody's decision. Like, I wouldn't have made a long run probably, for example, because I knew that I only needed to get 3 fish up there. Well, in 2 hours, if it's a 5 fish, the best of 5, I would have stayed south.
Yeah.
So
weird. All right, so moving on towards some fun stuff. So I wanted to get in with you about what's behind you.
Oh, I don't know if you can see it or not, but she's out there.
So you have what I feel like it could be one of my favorite places in the whole world. You have a pond. I don't know, how many acres is that?
The pond itself is probably 6.5, 7 acres.
And so I was lucky to be able to come fish with you, ice fish. You had a little tournament out there last year. It was a lot of fun. But you have set that thing up, and it is just remarkable. If you can kind of talk through what you did and kind of what it's like over there.
Sure. Yeah, when we got this property, it was, I don't know, 11 years ago or so. I knew the potential was here. There used to be a pretty good sized lake, and the years had deteriorated the dam. The property that we had bought didn't include the dam. It was just shoreline on it, and it was kind of like a mud hole. I mean, there was fish in there and stuff, and ducks and everything bring in fish and everything, and there was seasonal fish in there, but it wasn't anything great. I had gone on for years trying to fix the dam, and I had no success. Well, the land adjacent to me had changed hands, and a kid had inherited it and ended up selling me the 10 acres that included the dam. So that was probably 4 years ago now, 5 years ago. And that's when we went in and made all the repairs, put in new culverts and that sort of thing that go through. And it rose the level of the water all the way up. And I think the maximum depth is like 14.5, 15 feet now in the middle. And I ended up taking a lot of trees on the outside and cutting them down for cover. So there's areas that are just so thick of trees that it's almost impossible to fish. It's kind of like fish refuge, that you can try to fish it, maybe ice fish it or something, but a lot of it's just going to be safe refuge for them. We ended up doing artificial fish reefs. Have you ever seen those big spools that are on electrical wiring? They're like PVC in the middle with wood on each side.
Yep.
There was a guy that gave me as many as I wanted, so I got a trailer full of those, and I screwed them together looking like a wedding cake. And we ended up putting those down. So when you're on live scope and you look at it, there's like a triangle. It looks like this with like a wedding cake, and the fish they swim in between it. They're just adjacent to it. They love that. And we put in a new dock out there and stuff, and I've watched the fish flourish in there quite a bit, and I try to put the balance of habitat in there with bait fish. I buy from a commercial breeder a bunch of fathead minnows and get them in there, and make sure they have enough food and all that sort of stuff. But I've seen it really take off here, and now you go out there right now and it's pretty easy to catch decent sized fish. It's kind of a management thing now, trying to make sure that certain species don't get stunted, like the crappies and stuff. So making sure you take a few out and keep the right size and all that sort of thing. But so it's nice.
How has that been for you? Is that like a whole new little fun little world of experimenting and fishing? Yeah,
it is. I ended up getting a tagging gun. So this next year we're going to start keeping a book with fish with plastic tags on them and try to record their growth. See how many, try to base the population based on how many you catch being with tagged and that sort of stuff. So that's the goal anyways.
It just fascinates me because it's such a big. I mean, I have a little under an acre pond in my backyard. It was basically dug for the house, and there's you put fish in there. They just don't last, right? You have to have an aerator. But you seem to be getting. You don't have an aerator, so you have water flow through. Man, it just I just fascinated and what you got going on there.
Yeah, there's some natural springs that are out there. The water flow is a lot of it's seasonal. All the runoff and that sort of thing. So it seems like every year we have plenty of water run until like July 4th. And then we get into those August and September months where it's really dry. And I actually, I devised a steel plate that goes over the culvert. So if we're like the end of June and I know that that water season's starting the rain season's starting to, I'll put that steel plate in there and try to raise the overall level another 4 or 5 inches. And that's what I think helped a lot with our dry fall. Was I started out, and so after 3-4 weeks that became even with the culverts, and then I was that much farther ahead on the pond level going into the winter. Without that, I would definitely be down another foot or so when we are. So yeah, just the little things like that I try to pay attention to, like the seasonal rainfall. Being deeper helps. I plow a lot of the snow off because I know that can help oxygen levels, having that sunlight come through. I do have some air pumps if I really need to put them out there, but I really haven't needed to do that since the the water level came up. And I'm sure there's going to be partial winter kills no matter what in certain areas, but it's staying pretty healthy.
Hey listeners, let's talk outdoor streaming. What is the best outdoor streaming platform out there? Well, it's simple. It's Fixed TV. Not only do they have this great program, but they have all kinds of hunting and fishing shows along with some weaponry shows. So when you get bored and need something to do, get your fix with Fixed TV. And when you're done with that, and you have that fix to get out in the outdoors, jump on therealshot.com and get everything you need to satisfy your fix.
Right. It's just fascinating to me that's that how quickly you've gotten it to be a very good fishery. I mean, there was, when I was up there last year, it was was clear ice and wasn't that stuff, so the fish were pretty skittish. I think we kind of learned a little bit of what live scope does back then. Last year when everybody had their live scopes, and it seemed like all the fish just kind of disappeared because they were getting freaked out or something.
Yeah, and that goes to it. Same thing I was thinking about earlier. Was it the shallower water and us just walking around so much and the noise on top, or was it all the beams down there? I mean, I think you have a pretty solid case that it could be all the electronics in one area that just they completely shut off.
Right. There was a lot of, they could have cooked a chicken down there. There was a lot of electronics, beams that were flying around down there.
Yeah, they were in hibernation mode because, I mean, the first hour everybody was catching fish. It was like, oh, they got a fish, and then it was very, very infrequent after that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there are bite windows out here. When I was out here the other day, it was great from 12 to 1, and then from about 1:30 to 3, completely dead. So there's got to be like layer upon layer of reasons that what they're doing.
Right. So does that make you not want to go out fishing as much that you have that in your backyard, or you go more, or do you fish more often because it's in your backyard?
It's cheaper. So it's a matter of convenience for me to be able to slip out there. And honestly, even when the open water is, I'll go down there just with a rod and reel, and I'll cast for 30-40 minutes and then come back in the house. So it gives me my fix of fishing without having to spend a whole day. If it's evening or late morning or any time that I just want to get out for a few minutes, I can do that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I definitely, with the tournaments and everything, I'm spending more time fishing away than I am here during the summer for sure. And then as far as winter goes, it's just kind of fun fishing, going out there when it's nicer out. I wouldn't go out there yesterday when it was 40-mile-per-hour winds for sure. But
what I think is funny, what I commend you for, is that you have laid off not making easy paths to go fishing. Now, when I came, it was ice fishing, so it was no big deal. But I was looking at the shoreline, thinking of all the places, and I grew up as a shore fisherman. I'm like, I would have this thing clear cut, and there'd be nothing around the edges. Where you've held off, you're dropping stuff down in there, and you're leaving it sit there, and just kind of fish around those areas. And a lot of us couldn't do that.
Yeah, well, I probably will open up a couple areas just to access from shore, but the majority of it's just going to remain natural, so they have a place of refuge, and it's just nice to be able to have that where there's an undercut bank or something where you can only access it from a canoe or a little paddle boat or something like that. And if you get lucky, you draw them out, you do, but it's not going to be easy.
That's cool. So what does your son and the family think about that? They spend a lot of time down there as well?
He does. He kind of it seems like he gets into fishing and out of fishing. He'll get involved with football or video games and then go back into fishing. He's excited about tournaments, so I think that's going to be a direction we end up going. Maybe I do the NWT. He wants to do a co-angler thing. I think he's got another year or two, but he could do MWTs with me. He's caught a few with live scope. He's trying to learn too, and I'm teaching him, but I'm also learning at the same time. So it's all very adaptive.
It's probably only a matter of time before he catches you and passes you by.
Yeah, those kids are good at the electronics. For sure.
Right. Oh, that's funny. So what else you got crack in the works?
This time of year, I kind of have to balance my life between fishing and fun, but I do the real estate thing. And my partner and I, Ryan, he fishes the NWT as a co. I kind of dragged him into that realm. But we ended up going to multiple states, attending these tax sales that mostly are abandoned property. Most of them are in pretty dire condition, but we try to find some kind of value in something that other people wouldn't. It's just a lot of time on the road looking at these small towns and dilapidated houses that have, overgrowth around them and that sort of thing. And like I said, sometimes we get lucky and we find that diamond in the rough, and that's what pays the bills, is when we go out there and we start looking for these properties and researching them and seeing what the market value would be if we fixed it up, or, what somebody else as an investor would see that as. So I don't know. It's been fun. It's a constant journey for me, because you never know what you're going to find. You literally pull up to an address and you're like, well, what's going on with this one? This last, we had school buses. We've seen the bad side of things where, like, obviously, drugs and alcohol have paid a price, or they've played a role in the person not being there anymore or whatever, So there's a lot of sad situations that you end up having to deal with. But it's part of our business. We try to be, if we run into a situation where there's somebody still living there, we try to be compassionate about making arrangements for them to stay there and that sort of stuff. So it's just it's a very unique career path that I've chosen, but it's still, it's good for us.
But I guess the other way too, it always interests me of what people do that fish as much as we do, to be able to have the time to do that, to be able to have time to go out and fish as much as we do. Right.
Yeah. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but before I did mostly real estate, and I've done real estate since I've been in college. I flew airplanes for airlines for a while, and then I ended up opening a food concession business and doing fairs and festivals. And that was probably my main job, that I realized that if I worked really hard, like at a fair or festival with a food stand for, let's say, 12 weekends a year, I could make enough money to sustain not working the rest of the year. And then to me, it was just a time equation. If I can work really hard 12 weekends, then I get the rest of the year off. I'll choose that, because I'd rather go fishing.
So you got your upgrades this year were moving from 12-inch to 16-inch screen, and then adding the power pole. Yep.
We're gonna put that on the boat, and we're gonna see where we go. And I really like that Kraken trolling motor. It was a newer model.
So how'd that work for you? Was it the same as you had Minn Kota before?
I only had a Charova, and I know that Minn Kota has the other ones, but yeah, I had a huge upgrade because I was just going up in model. Plus, I switched brands, but the wireless foot pedal on the Kraken, I really like that, because I can use it even from the back of the boat if I want to control it with my foot. But it's just really smooth, and it's very responsive too. You wouldn't think so with a wireless system, but I really like that, and really good. I can really get it down and go. So cover a lot of ground. Having that transducer on the front is huge, and we're just going to keep going at it and try to keep getting better.
So what are you looking for in the year next year? You got goals? I know you said you hadn't really quite decided what you're going to go, or how many NWTs you're going to be in, and kind of what direction you're going to go yet. But do you have any goals in those? Just outline goals.
I guess I might as well keep the same goals I had last year, since we didn't achieve the top 10. We might as well check that one off first on the NWT. But also crossing that border to fish some of the other circuits and some of the other events, and even some in the fall there's non-circuit events that are happening in Minnesota that, even if they're a smaller one, and there's a lot of them don't have live scopers on there that are, I would say, they're not at the level of proficiency as the top NWT guys.
Right.
So that's why I see an opportunity to actually do well. And as long as I'm fishing, it doesn't really matter what level it is. Just to compete and get out there and fish is fun with me.
Right, a lot of those are fun. Or there's actually, a tournament locally in Oshkosh that just has absolute freaking hammers in it, and there's only like 30 of us in it, and just like it's crazy every year. I get into, I'm like, look at all these dudes I'm fishing. I mean, these guys are crazy. They've been, pounding this lake for years, but it's just a little itty bitty tournament, but it's so much fun. It doesn't really have to be an NWT or MWC or Walleye Nationals, all that kind of stuff. It can just be kind of whatever to get your blood going.
The advent of the Calcutta element, I really didn't even know what that meant until this year. So that's interesting element too, with the whole bidding process of teams, and you can actually buy yourself, and if you're
right,
I don't know, it's kind of crazy.
So I was just trying to pull up the NWTs for next year. Just want to get your idea what you're thinking, but I'm having there we go.
I know the first one was supposed to be North Dakota, and now they're coming down to here.
Yeah, so the first one's going to be Lake Sharp in Pierre, South Dakota. So what do you think about that? I've never fished there before.
Yeah, I used to fish there for fun. I used to live in South Dakota and go out there in the spring, and for us it was just vertical jigging with a jig and a minnow, no live scope or anything. And there was a lot of cookie cutters, 16, 17, 18s. And I think that system has a lot of those smaller fish. But, my MWC partners, Tom Seberg, they fished the championship out there, and they caught some bigger fish in that system. I'm sure I'll do some exploring down south, maybe look in some of those coves and see if we can find some, the bigger females that are up there that time of year.
Right. And that's do you think like they're getting into going to too many bigger bodies of water? It seems like over the last couple of years that they're really going to these bigger things. Would you want to see them get smaller stuff, or what do you think about their rules and what direction they're going?
I think that one of the reasons why they do that is the size of the tournament fields. A lot of these smaller lakes, they're good for championships. Like Ottertail Lake was a small 40 boat championship. And once you get over like 100 boats, it seems that it's harder to hold those on some of the natural lakes. But I would love to see it, honestly. And that's one of the reasons too. Like we talked about Petenwell before the broadcast. Like I've never fished that lake, but its proximity to where I'm at and the MWC. Like I'm probably going to jump in there with Chase.
Right. That's actually there's we have AIM, Wisconsin there too, and MWC is there back to back. And I'm like, maybe we just take off a couple weeks and we don't leave out there. And then then it's going to be the Mississippi River and La Crosse.
Yep.
So that's fairly close to you too as well, ish, I guess.
Yeah. I've never fished down there. I probably should. I just, with a limited amount of time, I try to figure out Pool 4, because as much time as I spent out there, there's just still so much to learn on that river system in just one area. For me, that might be the one that live scope isn't a big player. I told myself that the next Mississippi River event, I'm just going to get willow cats and chunk them into current seams over and over until we find the fish.
Yeah. So I went and pre-fished that this in the fall. I went out there because I had never fished La Crosse either, and I'm like, you know what? I love the river. I love current. If I was going to fish a tournament this next year, it might be that one. So we went out there, and my mind is still racked of all the places we looked at, and we spent. I think we were out there for 3 days. Just went out for a long weekend, and we did the first day. We kind of buzzed around. The water level was pretty high for that time of year, and a day on the river and a day in the backwaters, and my brain had just fried. I didn't even, just so much if you get into the wing dams, and we all talk about wing dams, but there's stretches that there's 10 wing dams in a row, and they're almost 500 feet long each one, and you have so much ground to cover. It's crazy. Yeah.
And but the last event was proven too, is like there's all these micro systems in a river like that with the backwaters, and these fish literally are everywhere. You can catch them everywhere. There's migration patterns and they move and stuff, but it seems like look how spread out everybody was at the last event. I mean, they were some in pool 3 and some were upper pool 4, some were lower pool 4. I mean, at that point it comes down to it's almost better to try to look for something closer to takeoff that works, because then it's all about maximizing your time.
Right, and that one section, there is so much. I mean, it'll be interesting to me to see who goes up, who goes down. But there is so much fish in that one section. That was the first time I ever used willow cats, and they do hurt when you get stung by them. That wasn't a lot of fun. But yeah, there was places where we'd be in the backwaters and we'd be sitting, fishing, where the backwaters kind of cuts in, cuts out. It'd be 25 feet deep, and 2 seconds later, we're getting hung up, and I pull the troll motor up because it's too shallow.
Yeah, there's a lot of closing dams in those channels that you have to be careful with. People have fallen victim to numerous times.
Yeah, no, yeah, you gotta be, definitely gotta be careful. And they're full of fish too, so you're kind of like, sometimes it's hard to get anywhere. You're like, okay, I go in here and I gotta go to here and then here, and you're slowing down and trying to scoot over this dam, and that's crazy.
Yep.
Yes, that's one that kind of piqued my interest. And then on to like Huron, which I don't really know much about other than it's really freaking big. That's kind of where like they go to Huron and go to Lake Erie, and I understand Lake Erie, I guess, because of all the fish out there right now. But that's where it kind of gets me, where it kind of pushes people. It kind of pushes people out from doing it. That's other big ass waters.
It's a lot of commitment if you're not already living out there. I mean, right? I think the Erie event is in Dunkirk, which that's going to 12 hours. You're probably talking 15 hours each way for that. For me, it's not a big deal. I mean, just because I'm self-employed and I'm already on the road, so another 3 hours is another 3 hours if you're rolling. But I can see where, just everything from the cost to the extra time can, play a big factor there.
Right. Yeah, that's I just wonder, and I see and talk to some people, and as my coming up, and maybe it's a good thing, maybe for the NWT to really set themselves above it, and that's the premier league to be in. I get it, but it just seems to me like people are kind of looking to other things to do and looking to more local things. I mean, I desperately would love to fish the AIM River Series. Would be just fabulous. Spend the whole year in a river. I mean, that would. Part of me goes, we should just do that. Just get rid of all the other tournaments. Let's do that But yeah, it just seems like it's just that at some point the NWT, and maybe it has to become that ultimate league, and I kind of feel like it probably is already, but it almost like it's kind of pricing guys that don't do it for a living out of it, kind of in a way.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that they're not going to do it, but I've heard that before, and then all of a sudden you show up in the first, you see everybody shows up again. So, the first event could be an indicator for me. Making the championship and having no entry is a big deal.
Yep.
If whether or not you have 45 guys or you have 70 guys that are going to do all four, that's a big difference in your odds of making it.
Right.
So, and it also plays into like, if you have an idea how many people are going to fish, how aggressive you can be. Because I feel like if you want to be conservative and just make the championship, I think that can be done pretty easily.
Yeah. If you know how to work a calculator and you can look back at old years, it's not easy, but yeah, you can make it happen.
Yeah, you can sneak in a low 30 spot by just go catching your 5 fish. I mean, that's the most important thing, bringing 5 fish in every time. And when you're taking gambles for a win, you just need one day where it messes up and now you're way down on the point.
Right. Is there anything you'd want to see them change? Would you want to see them go? Are you less get to catch, pitch, and release, or do you think that can be done safe?
I'm especially with the advent of the technology we're talking about. I'd like to see the fisheries, protect them with the. There's got to be some other way, like I said, to draw an audience in or to do something in this new digital age that has the same amount of excitement. Like I know other organizations have tried to do the live thing. My biggest thing is we have technology with Skylink or whatever it's called. What's the actually I'm talking to you right now off a satellite system for our internet. We lived in this house with basic phone service with 2 bars and no internet for years, and now we have the technology that we can put these units on every boat where we have Wi-Fi everywhere.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm sitting in the home of Fixed TV, and they do live fishing shows all over the United States, and they don't seem to have a problem. Yeah, you might have some issues here and there, but they're doing it pretty well. And I don't know how that looks like. I just I hope someday we can kind of get to that. I don't know if maybe the money's not in it yet for enough sponsors to push into that new realm, because obviously everything new costs money to get into there and to push the new technologies.
Yeah. If you have like even 10 or 15 of these Starlink systems and you just put them in the top guys' boats from every day, like that's a lot of content that you can sift through and
right.
a lot of excitement to give people. So
well, that's the other thing too, is most of the guys I see that go out are running double GoPros, right? I mean, I do it for content. I do it just in case somebody calls me a liar. I'll be like, okay, let's pull the GoPro up. I can show you I caught this fish. But everybody's already filming themselves anyways. I don't know much. I mean, you go to an event, most people have, the YOLO on the back and a camera on the window. It's pretty standard now.
Yeah. This last year, I meant to do some streaming on TikTok, but every time we went to a place, I mean, I didn't have the reception that was really going to hold. I might have it for takeoff, but 5 minutes into my run, it's going to be gone in the middle of Bay. So I kind of was limited in what I could do for my live streaming. But I always thought that was kind of fun to do, like have people watch an actual event live, and anything that we can do to get more content out there and grow the sport, I'm on board with.
Right, especially now that a lot of the content's being filmed in the front of the boat. You don't really need to move the camera around. Right. Awesome. So is there any new lures or anything like that, or poles or other tech that you're looking into this year for next year that excites you?
I'm going to probably stick with mostly what I got. I ended up being part of MPA. I got a nice discount Lewis products, and so I run a lot of Lewis rods and reels. Got the Garmin stuff up front. As far as honestly, scoping, I would say 80 to 90% of the time it's just going to be a jig and a crawler for me. Just once that water warms up, it seems like day in, day out that works better than anything else.
Right. Isn't that something that we're coming back to, just jig and a crawler?
Yeah.
Right? It's back to Old Faithful.
Yeah. So then it's just about, for me, playing with different line diameters and sensitivities on the rods and that sort of stuff. But other than that, kind of keep it simple, Get the bait in front of their face and try to interact with them and see. I think you can tell a lot about their mood. Sometimes they want to. I found a couple times, where a jig in a plastic, and I can't go into too many details because it's kind of one of those secrets, right? I want to hold, but a jig in a plastic worked a certain way, and having it, playing keep away from them was a big thing for me this year on a couple of bodies of water.
That's awesome. It's funny. I find myself now, I currently have in my phone, I have a notes page, and if I can't get to my notes page, I'll write an email to myself, and I have all these list of all these things I want to try that just kind of randomly go through my head when I'm not working or I'm driving. I'm thinking about, okay, I could do this. Okay, I want to try this. I want to try this. I want to try this. I want to see if I can get one of these rods. Does it make a difference for, if I'm casting all the time? If I'm running a 7.2 rods, that can be different than I'm running this. And I have all these notes I just keep compiling through the year and get to this. I can't wait to the spring to start trying them out.
Nice.
So awesome. Well, thanks for being on. By the way, you're my first ever duplicate.
Wow.
So
very cool.
I love having you on, talking all that kind of fun stuff. And I'm hoping to hear from you coming up, and we can love to come out there and defend my title over there and take it to bring some more Wisco guys out to make sure it stays here.
Yeah, that reminds me. So I'm going to order that plastic coming up. I got to pick a day first, so I'll be in contact trying to get something that works for everybody, and we'll make it work. I think the earlier in the seasons, the better. It seems like that auction level starts dropping down, so does their
they start slowing. That makes sense. All right, well, until next time, if you're looking to be on an episode of Walleye Chronicles, give me a call, give me a holler, send me an email, send me whatever. Look me up on my socials at Smile and Fish on TikTok and Matt Snell on Facebook and Instagram. Until then, there's two things you can do every day to make somebody's day awesome. One is take them fishing, two, give them a smile. Have a great day.